right, so we have the Instant Pot Gourmet here. It is a great pressure cooker. It's exclusive to Costco. Came out in 2020.
Right, they had it on a special last Christmas,
It was
and
a
a lot
deal.
of people picked it up, and I think this year probably be another great Black Friday deal.
So if you have a new gourmet and you're wondering how to get started, we've got you covered. So I'm Jen.
And I'm Barbara.
And we're with Pressure Cooking Today. All right, so for the different parts of your pressure cooker, you've got the lid, and then you have your stainless steel inner pot, and then you have your housing.
You never cook directly in the housing.
I like to use a little wooden spoon on top just to remind me that there is not a pot in there. Please don't add water or it's going to make a mess all over your counter and potentially damage your pot.
Right.
The housing has this little inner heating plate that heats up when it's on, and it's also got this little spring that kind of it senses when there's a pot in place. Just put that down on it. The inner pot is made of stainless steel. It is domed, so it's not completely flat. You can't use it on your stovetop. And you also, when you are sauteing, you need to, sometimes you need to like swirl
the oil
pot.
will run to the sides because of the dome. So if you just swirl it around, then it makes it easier to like brown your meat or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So, and then we've got the lid. So let's talk about the top side of the lid first. We've got, let's lock that in place. So you have the pressure release valve. This is where the steam comes out. You have your float valve, and you have, this is kind of like your little switch. For the gourmet, you push it down to vent it, and you twist it to open it.
So one nice feature about that is it always resets. You don't ever have to worry about switching it from sealing to venting.
It always just pops itself back up. It's so nice because I would forget quite a bit. So, and then on the underside of the lid, you have this little metal ring is where your sealing ring attaches. You've got your float valve. I'll let you demo that.
So this little float valve is what raises up and seals up the pot. So it's very important that you keep it clean. It has a little gasket on the end that you just pull off. And then you just let that float valve fall into your hand, and then you can clean it. In the same way, when you reinstall it, put it up inside and put that little gasket back on.
Your pressure cooker will not work without that float valve, so you want to make sure that you're careful with it. I always just keep it in my hand, clean it, and immediately put it back in.
And this little
anti-block shield.
That comes off for cleaning as well.
On new ones, it can be a little tight. If you want, you can take a butter knife, or they sell these little, they're like chair leg covers. They sell them at the hardware store, and they are the perfect size. You just push it down on top, and it just pops out so easy. So if you're having a hard time getting it off, those are two options for you.
It does loosen up as you use it. These are not quite so tight once it's been on and off several times.
Yeah, so that's an option. And you just push it back in place once it's clean.
And then the other important thing is the silicone gasket.
So this ring you just put kind of overlap on top, and then you just kind of push it in place. I like to kind of hold it against my body. It just goes in easier that way. I just run my finger around. You want to make sure that the whole ring is tucked into that little silver slot right in the middle. There you go. Just like that. If the ring is ever out of place, like if you've got it mostly on but it's still a little bit out of place, when you lock the lid in place, steam's going to come out of the side where that ring is, and your food won't cook properly. So again, it's really important to get in the habit of checking that sealing ring, make sure everything is down.
And I wash that almost every time that I use my pressure cooker. Maybe if I'm boiling water or something, I wouldn't bother, but it's important to keep that really nice and clean.
Yeah, if you are making a more delicate dish, like a cheesecake especially, but also rices or oats or things like that, I like to keep a separate ring for sweets and a different one for like my meats that have a more savory, intense spices.
Because the silicone does absorb odors, and it's difficult to get rid of that odor. We've tried everything. But I like to just let it air out over time. It will air out. Jen prefers just to hide it in a Ziploc so she can't smell the odors, and use different rings for different purposes. This Gourmet comes with 2 rings, so that makes it really convenient.
Yep. All right, let's talk about the different buttons. So as you can tell, the Gourmet has the buttons kind of arranged down each side. There's a ton of presets, and I know that can be overwhelming for a lot of beginning cooks. But the important thing to remember about the presets is they are just a suggested cook time. They do not tell you whether or not the food in your pot is actually cooked through. There's no sensors. There's no like internal temperature sensors. So it doesn't know if you're using the poultry button. It doesn't know if the chicken is diced and cubed small or whole and frozen. It just doesn't know. It's just a suggested cook time.
So we prefer just to use the pressure cook button
And the
saute button. So let's talk first about the saute button.
Okay, so when you use the saute button, you want to use it with the lid off, just like you would a pot on the stove. So the Gourmet doesn't have a start button.
Just wait a few seconds
and you'll hear a
it'll
beep. And it'll change to say on the display.
And then if you wait, it will actually change from on to hot. And then you know that it's time to add your oil and your other ingredients.
I'll often add my butter a little bit earlier just so it starts to melt.
Especially if I'm doing meat, I want to make sure it's nice and hot so that I get a good sear on my meat. If I'm doing a roast, you want that nice browning and that flavor. So I'll make sure to wait until it says hot. Then I add my oil and then add the meat.
If you want, you can adjust the temperature of your pot. If you hit the saute button repeatedly, it will adjust it to more, less, or normal. I almost always cook on normal. I'm a little bit, I just forget to change it.
And if I'm doing meat, I'm going to change it to more so it's a little hotter. If I'm simmering the sauce, I'll change it to less so that it simmers a little bit lower. And also if you're simmering and it's simmering a little too hot, you can just lift that inner pot up a little bit away from the heating element, and then it will slow down the boil. This pot can get kind of hot, so you'll want to use some
the little mini mitts
or
a hot pad.
So the next button that we use all the time,
the pressure cook button. That is the workhorse. 99.9% of the meals we cook use saute and or pressure cook.
So anytime you want to pressure cook, you can just set the pressure and the time, lock your lid in place, and you're good to go.
Yep. So I like to be in the habit before I pressure cook, I always check for 3 things. I check to make sure my pot is in place. I check to make sure that we have water in the pot. It's so frustrating when you set your dinner up to cook, like pot and pot or something, and there's no water in the pot, and you come back after a pressure cook cycle and nothing's happened. Because without some sort of thin liquid, it will not boil, it will not create the steam, it will not cook.
So chicken broths are great, apple juice, water,
any thin liquid. So we'll just add a cup here. Since we're using a 6-quart pressure cooker, 1 cup is kind of the default minimum liquid amount. If you're cooking foods like berries or chickens that release a lot of water, you can go less, but follow a trusted recipe.
Right, especially when you're just getting started.
Yep. And then again, I always double check my lid, the gasket is in place. And then when you want to put the lid on, you've got this notch back here. It matches up with this notch on the back of the pressure cooker, and it's got a little arrow, and it'll match up with the arrow over here. And put it down and twist it into place. Then you can go ahead and hit the pressure cook button. Use the plus or minus buttons to adjust your cook time to as specified by the recipe, and then wait a minute and it will beep to indicate that it is starting to pressure cook. All right, so you can see the pressure cooker beeped and now the display reads on. It's going to stay at on until this float valve comes up and the temperature inside the pot reaches the correct internal pressure.
Yeah, sometimes the float valve will be up and you'll say, well, why didn't the time start counting down? It's just because it hasn't quite reached pressure inside the pot.
Give it another minute or 2 and it should get there. Especially when you're cooking things like soups, big batches of soups.
Right. If you're cooking a big batch of soup with cold ingredients, it can take as long as 20 minutes for it to come to pressure. So a lot of new cooks think, oh no, it's not working, but it really is. Okay, the time is up, so now we need to decide on a pressure release.
Your recipe will specify what you need to do. A lot of our recipes will say allow the pressure to release naturally for 5 minutes and finish with a quick pressure release. So your natural release is basically do nothing. Don't do anything for 5 minutes. Let the pressure kind of slowly and gently release. The heat on the bottom will stop heating, and so it will naturally cool down slowly over time. Some recipes call for a complete natural release, and that's just you literally do nothing until the float valve falls down.
Right. The length of time that will take depends on what's in your pot.
Absolutely.
If you have a roast in there or soup, it's going to take a lot longer for the pressure to release.
Yeah. So the quick release is the one that gets all the buzz. It's the one that creates the big jet of steam. And it releases the pressure as steam really, really quickly from the pot.
So in this Gourmet, it just has this push button. So all you have to do is push down on it.
So the float valve has dropped. It means that the pressure has released in the pot. The lid can unlock now. So you just turn it. And then You want to open it away from you because it's very steamy in there. Shake off a little bit of the liquid on the lid, and then these little lid fins fit perfectly into the slots in the handles, so it keeps that hot lid off your counter while you're cooking.
So now the pot we had set to go to the keep warm setting. So let's talk a little bit about keep warm.
All right, so the keep warm setting means that once the temperature inside the pot drops below a certain temperature, the keep warm setting will turn on. I think it's like 120 degrees to keep your food warm.
Yeah, so it's great if you're doing like a pot of soup and you have to go get the kids from school or practice, whatever, then your soup will be nice and warm, ready to serve. But it's not nice when you're cooking like rice
and you serve your family up, and then you eat dinner, and then you go get the kids ready for bed, and then you come back like 2 hours later and there's like a thin layer of dry rice on the bottom of your pot, because the keep warm setting will stand, I think the default is like, 10 hours, something like that. It's a long amount of time that the keep warm setting stays on.
I thought it was like 4, but.
Okay, 4, 10, whatever. I've never tested it. Usually if it's on longer than like 30 minutes, it's a problem.
So you can turn off the keep warm setting before you start if you know you don't want that on, or you can turn it off.
After the pressure cooking setting
Or you
is done.
can just unplug it.
That's what I usually do. Then I don't have to worry about forgetting.
So that's the gourmet.
If you found this video helpful, we'd love to have you like and subscribe. We also want you to know we have a ton of resources for beginning cooks. We really want you to be successful. The Instant Pot has been so nice in my family's home cooking, and we'd like you to have the same success.
We have an ebook.
Yep, if you subscribe for our email, we will send you 1 recipe a week, and as a thank you, we'll also send you this ebook that basically goes through everything from getting it out, putting the parts together, to making your first meal in the pressure cooker. We selected a really easy one. We've got tons of beginner recipes on our site. We've got basically anything we can think of to help you succeed. So if you have any questions for us, leave us a comment, and
be sure and like and subscribe.
We'll see you soon.